Hi guys, and welcome back to my channel. So it is Thursday, and even though we are probably in Peru by the time you are seeing this video, I've really wanted to continue with the Turner Syndrome and Mental Monday videos, so we are still going with that this week. What I wanted to talk about with Turner Syndrome this week was something that I have gotten a lot of questions about, and I've addressed it a few times, but I'm not sure how recently I've addressed it, so I really wanted to kind of address it again. And I feel like it's a confusing concept to begin with, so it's not a bad idea to kind of re-look at it every once in a while and try to understand it just that much better. I've gotten the question quite a bit of how do you get Turner Syndrome? How do you inherit Turner Syndrome? And the answer to that is you don't. The way Turner Syndrome occurs is in the conception process. There is a certain point during it that there's what I call a little hiccup. And every cell made after that little hiccup is damaged in one of two ways. It's either mosaic, where a whole X is healthy and then the second X is broken, so there's bits and pieces of it like chewed off, damaged. It's not a whole X, but there's parts of an X. There's a partial X there. And then the other is classic Turner's, which is what I have, and that's where every cell made after that point has a whole X chromosome missing from the cell. So this is the biggest reason there's so much variation, and this is a huge reason why it's been difficult for doctors or researchers to figure out what causes Turner Syndrome, because there's no cause that's been found. It's not inherited at all. That would mean that my mom would have had to have it for me to have it, and that is not the case. I've seen back and forth things on whether or not I could pass it on if we happen to spontaneously conceive naturally. So I'm not settled on that point yet. But I didn't inherit it from either of my parents. It only happens in women, and they don't know what causes it. But it is not inherited, and they don't have a cause for it, but they know vaguely what it causes, as far as these are the general things it causes. So short stature is a major one, delayed puberty, infertility, NVLD, which is nonverbal learning disorder, and there's a myriad of other little tiny things that it can happen. There's also thyroid problems it can cause. It can cause liver problems, it can cause heart problems. The biggest concern is heart problems, and that's just because of the damage done to the chromosome. All of these things are then affected, and so they are super careful. They watch Turner's women very, very closely, and the earlier the diagnosis, the better. The way I was diagnosed was there was fluid in my chest cavity and in the back of my neck. They at first weren't sure what it was. They didn't immediately jump to Turner Syndrome. They actually thought it was my brain seeping out of the back of my head. It was not. A specialist actually told my mom I have a beautiful brain. Go figure! So they ended up doing an amniocentesis, and that's where they test the fluid around the baby, the amniotic fluid, and I was diagnosed with Turner Syndrome. They did say that I'd have to get an actual blood test on me when I got older to make sure of the karyotyping, because they thought I was classic, but we weren't sure totally because I have such few symptoms. I have such few health issues or complications, and that's the variance it can have. There's a spectrum, and wherever the point of conception is that the damage begins is how many cells are affected and how much of that girl or that woman would be affected. This is the knowledge I've gained, at least. I don't have too much to back up the theory of the point of conception being a major deciding factor for how many symptoms the girl has, but I know for me, that's been my biggest guess because I am classic. And according to classic, every girl is different, but I have a lot fewer symptoms. And at first, me and my parents were kind of questioning if I would end up being classic or if I'd be mosaic, just because I had such few symptoms. And I mean, we had been told I was most likely classic, but we didn't know for sure until I was karyotyped when I started seeing an endo when I was like 12 or 13. And that told us that I was classic, but that still doesn't explain the few symptoms. And so I really think mine happened later in conception, and that's why, and that each girl can be affected differently based off of what the damage is specifically for her and where in the conception process it happened, leading to how many of her cells are actually affected by that damage. So how many cells of mine are actually missing a chromosome, things like that. So that is how you get Turner syndrome. There's not actually, it's not like you catch it. It's not like there's any reasoning behind it. It kind of just happens. And then all of those cells afterwards are affected in one of those two ways. Those are the generic two ways. There's a lot of variants on karyotyping as well. I don't know as much about those variances, but I know Mosaic and Classic pretty well. That is the general understanding of what Turner syndrome is, biologically, scientifically, how it occurs, what is actually happening when you say somebody has Turner syndrome, like what happens during development that causes it, or what it causes to happen during development that it is. They don't know what causes that little hiccup to happen, but they know it happens and they know what it usually causes or what it can cause from the statistics they've collected from the girls they've seen. So obviously the variance means each girl is going to be very different, and it is going to be very important to find out as early as possible so that they can learn how specifically Turner syndrome affects them and what they might need to do to help themselves and take care of themselves. I think there's a ton more research that could be done to help this as well, and just overall awareness to get more doctors and teachers aware of Turner syndrome and its effects so it can be caught early, and so those girls and women can have the help and support that they need. So that is my little spiel, my explanation to the best of my ability of what Turner syndrome is and how it affects you. If you have any other information or another really great way of explaining it, I would love to hear that in the comments. If you have any other questions that has to do with that, leave those in the comments as well, and I will answer those to the best of my ability. And I hope you liked this video. If you did, give it a thumbs up and share it with everybody, and I will see you guys tomorrow. Bye!